Good morning. My name is Andy Wade and I'm Chair of the Climate Emergency and Scrutiny Panel. This is a meeting for a call-in, and so there are special conditions for that particular meeting. It's essentially a one-item agenda, and so we can crack on. So the first thing I'm going to say is that the meeting is about a process which led to an informed decision. So the discussions that we are going to have this morning will be based on the papers that we have been given, the process that was made, and then the decision. So it's not about whether the decision is right or wrong, it's about the process that you've gone through. It's lovely to see so many people in the public gallery. I hope we don't bore you too much. Can I just remind you that you are observers? I'm not expecting any comments from anybody in the public gallery. Okay? So, welcome also to the 12 speakers, who I think will be explained as the meeting goes on how that process will work. I'll mention the traffic lights now, so I might forget later on. There is a traffic light system. You have 3 minutes, and the amber starts after 2. So it's green for 2 minutes, then it's amber for 1, and then you stop when it goes red. Okay? Thank you. Right, so can somebody read out the emergency procedures, please?
When the continuous alarm bell sounds, you must evacuate the building by one of the designated exits and proceed to the named assembly point. Designated exits are signposted. Arrangements are in place for the safe evacuation of disabled people.
Moving on to item 3, apologies for absence and substitutions.
We have apologies from Councillor Hedgitis, who has been substituted by Councillor Joanna Wright. Apologies from Councillor Grant Johnson, who is being substituted by Councillor Robin Moss. Apologies from Councillor Deborah Collins, who is being substituted by Councillor Fiona Gawley. And apologies from Councillor John Leach, who has been substituted by Councillor Hal McPhee. Okay, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest that councillors would like to make at this point? Okay, that's clear. I have no urgent business, so we can move on now to the items from the public and councillors. And Sean Hughes, I believe you're first.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, so I thought I would start by reminding us all of the corporate strategy that we hear so often about and the golden thread that drives our actions. Firstly, we have one overriding purpose: to improve people's lives. It continues to be at the foundation of our core corporate strategy and shapes our plans, spending and service delivery. The purpose is fundamental to who we are and what we do and remains unchanged. Secondly, under the Giving People a Bigger Say core policy, we continue to emphasise the need for working with local residents through the following commitments. We will listen to and work with residents to act on their concerns. It goes on to say, for our commitment relating to giving people a bigger say, these are equality and respect. Decisions are informed by evidence and community priorities, the latter of which will lead to area working with tailor-made solutions. So how does that affect and reflect on why we are here today? Public perception is that this council has designed a scheme that benefits a minority of more affluent residents rather than the majority. And I'm sure today we will hear from a select few who will, for them, the scheme is wonderful. No traffic, and we'll probably see increases in house values in the process. However, this is certainly not the experience of the majority. There is a concern that while data has been gathered during an ETRO process, it appears to have been interpreted to justify a predetermined conclusion rather than assessed from a neutral perspective. As a result, thousands of residents feel unheard and certainly do not feel that they have a bigger say. The perception is reinforced by the permanent nature of this experimental TRO. More broadly, The Council receives significant funding from WECA for each successfully completed LTN. However, the balance between income generation and the genuine public benefit seem to favour financial gain over serving the majority. Another key issue is the lack of coordination between this scheme and other initiatives designed to protect schools and students. Programmes such as the Safer Routes to School and the School Street schemes. This LTN directly contradicts and creates a traffic plan that risks displacing vehicles past the very schools these measures aim to protect. It would certainly be helpful during today's call-in if the Cabinet member could share the true costs and financial loss if not implementing the scheme, so we can fully understand some of the motivations behind what seems to be a hugely unpopular decision. My hope is today's call-in will adopt a common-sense, non-political approach, as the alternatives, such as judicial reviews, are not in anyone's interests, especially this Council.
Thank you. Appreciate the timing. Are there any questions for Councillor Rogers? Yes.
Sorry, I'm just trying to work out my microphone. You'd think I'd know how to use it. Thank you for your statement, Councillor Hughes. In terms of accessing schools, how has North Road, one of the major cycling routes up to Cleverton Down and to various schools and universities, been impacted by this LTN?
I'm afraid I can't give you any figures on the cycle routes implications. I'm sorry.
Okay, there don't appear to be further questions, so we can move on. Thank you, Sean. We can move on to the second speaker, who's Sarah Toy. Just bear with us for a minute. Are you okay to go? Okay, off you go, sir.
Okay. I'm speaking as a Chartered Civil Engineer, a travel behaviour change expert and a member of the research community at the University of Bath. Some of you may recall that I worked with Baines to co-create the One Shared Vision in line with your road user hierarchy of pedestrians first, cars last. My ongoing interests in this local scheme are professional and strategic. For the past 2 years, I've been researching the impact of travel behaviour schemes all over the world. It won't surprise you to hear that many, like your LN programme, face opposition from drivers who are being asked to change their habits. But this is the point. To make Bath streets safer and healthier, there needs to be change. And that change can only come from car drivers. You can see from the evidence of the trial how the Sydney Road experimental filter has changed lives for the better. Contrary to Claim 8, people have changed their behaviour, as evidenced by the 3,000 vehicles per day that have disappeared. The neighbourhood is measurably safer, quieter, cleaner and more convivial, with more children walking to school via Sydney Road. These are markers of the success as set out in the Council's original scheme criteria. Receiving complaints from car drivers suffering the inconvenience of a detour is also, in my opinion, a measure of success. It means that drivers are being asked to change their behaviour. This is what Bath needs to do to achieve the city's climate, road safety, air quality and active travel goals. As a transport professional, I am confident that the Council's consultation process has been robust, fair and inclusive. The reason for calling in this scheme is political, not evidence-based. The vocal minority campaign against has been delivered in an aggressive and bullying way, which has, I know, frightened people away from publicly supporting the scheme. This means Claim 2, that 70% oppose the scheme, does not represent the wider silent majority of Bath residents and visitors who are enjoying the benefits of the modal filter. Claim 4 states that households who suffer outweigh those who benefit and that a principal route into Bath has been closed off. These claims are, at best, inaccurate. I see that Darlington Street listed has fewer cars and pollution is not worse but better thanks to the previously implemented CAS. In other mentioned streets, I know that many residents support the scheme, and these streets do not include the hundreds of other residents and visitors to Bath who view the experiment positively. If you decide to remove the filter, you should be in no doubt that you are choosing to prioritise car drivers over walkers and cyclists in your local streets. If, however, you want to deliver your vision of a more livable city with a better quality of life for all, then you must, like many other councils, stand strong in the face of this opposition from a vocal minority of car drivers. Evidence shows behaviour change is really difficult, but if you make the Sydney Road modal filter permanent, people will adapt and opposition will fade away as the benefits become clear to everyone.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any questions? Joanna?
Thank you very much for your statement, Sarah. My question, you say that the process has been robust and fair. Can you let me know why representative polling wasn't used in gathering the data?
The council process doesn't require representative polling. It simply issues a consultation process, as all councils do for these types of schemes. So everyone in the whole of Bath had an opportunity to respond to it.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. We move on to Christine Harrington, sorry.
This LN is a community-led initiative based on 25 years' evidence of need. Contraclaim 2, the consultative process has been robust, wide, inclusive and varied over 4 years. In the most affected area, at least 72% support the ETRO as essential to create a safe and accessible neighbourhood for all. In the affected area, including residents of LN Barfik Estates and numerous properties removed from traffic, many object. Of these, plus objections from more than half of all respondents who live outside the area, 72% are motorists, some of whom will have contributed to the unsafe conditions prior to the ETRO. Contraclaim 7, to assess its effectiveness, reference was made to the aims and criteria of the ETRO. Evidence, not misinformation, underpins the outcomes. Yes, it prevents motorists from using this residential street as a shortcut. They still have access to local roads, parks and businesses. Yes, it improves the safety of the Sydney Road and North Road junctions for pedestrians, negating point 4. Plans to improve safety for cyclists are in the next phase. Yes, it creates 100% safer, quieter and healthier street for those walking, cycling or wheeling through the area. The police officer commented that before the modal filter, he was detecting significant numbers of speeding vehicles, at least 20 or 30 per visit. This, followed by 5 to 8 cars travelling at the same speed and time, created huge numbers of speeding vehicles. Speedwatch was stopped due to abusive behaviour. Yes, it enables more people in the area to walk or cycle for shorter journeys and reduces short car journeys. Contraclaim 7, several hundred Bath-wide consultees support these changes, including pupils, families, visitors and the less abled. Inaccurate claims from points 3, 7 and 6 also include not 4,500 displaced vehicles, 800 have disappeared and decreases on Bathwick Hill and Darlington Street make a total of almost 3,000 a day. Not 50% increased traffic elsewhere. There's an average of 34% on the A36, as little as 3.6 elsewhere, and decreases of 7 and 8%. 2 or 3 more cars an hour is negligible. There is no evidence of intolerable inconvenience or suffering. As per good practice, data was not taken during the A36 closure. In fact, data includes the extra traffic on the A36 during the 6 weeks North Parade closure. So, is making a safer and healthier city down to profit and loss? The claim of a loss of 135,000 from the delay of 1.4 million vehicles, meaning 4,000 a day, is inaccurate. The data found the delay trivial. So, on average, a journey now from Warminster Road to Darlington Street is around 13 seconds.
You need to bring
This claim
comments to a
requires a
conclusion.
rethink as well as the real agenda here. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Christine? Joanna?
Thank you for your statement, Christine. You say that this has been a piece of work that's been ongoing for 25 years.
Yes.
I'm not aware of the livable neighbourhood being a policy 25 years ago.
Well, in fact, the consultation of 2000 to 2003 under a Tory administration confirmed that the area that we're talking about should be a residential area removed from excessive traffic. In a way, we could describe that as a much more livable neighbourhood, because even then there was a huge amount of traffic detouring down that side of the park, because obviously it's much quicker. And obviously there were problems then of speeding and safety for pedestrians. The actual outcomes involved widening pavements and all sorts of things that didn't happen in preceding administrations. But this has got worse, and we've raised this issue ongoing. And in a way, we had thought that the link road would solve some of those problems.
Thank you. I think you've answered the question.
But actually, we then came to, I think it was your proposal of how good livable neighbourhoods would be for Bath, providing the main congestion is resolved as well. Does that help?
Are there any further questions?
Okay.
All right, the next speaker is Timothy Lloyd.
In support of the decision that the ETRO should be made permanent, I wish to focus on the assertion by the objectors in their point 3 that the traffic previously using Sydney Road and New Sydney Place has been displaced onto what they call less safe roads. That does not stand up to scrutiny. It's clear that Sydney Road and New Sydney Place was the less safe road. It used to be an obvious and attractive alternative route for the A36 for drivers because it had no traffic lights, nor pedestrian crossings, and nothing else to hold drivers up. It was therefore entirely natural for residents of Bathampton and others coming from the A36 to choose this route into Bath if they were heading for anywhere much other than Cleveland Bridge. The result was heavy traffic with cars, coaches and lorries, much of which ignored the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. But this space is also important for pedestrians wanting to cross Sydney Road and New Sydney Place in order to get access to Sydney Gardens, to the Holborn Museum and into central Bath. In doing so, they used to have to face heavy, fast and impatient vehicular traffic. This was dangerous and off-putting in itself, and all the more so for children, the elderly and others with impaired mobility. It was bound to lead to accidents, and it did. One of the very few accidents in the neighbourhood causing really serious injury in recent years, as recorded on CrashMap, occurred in 2022 at the bottom of New Sydney Place, where a car turning right into New Sydney Place hit a pedestrian who wanted to cross from the pavement on the south side of New Sydney Place to the refuge in the middle of Darlington Street. It's only a matter of good fortune that other accidents have not caused serious injury. Thus, in January 2024, sheets of plywood came off a truck speeding down New Sydney Place, landed on the pavement only just after a party of school pupils had passed by. In March 2023, a school bus turning right into New Sydney Place from Darlington Street too fast collided with a car coming the other way. Pupils were knocked off bicycles in 2021 and 23. The absence of any safeguarding provision for pedestrians in itself made Sydney Road and New Sydney Place unsuitable to be regarded as a through road for motor vehicles. That is why it is rational and correct to regard this road as less safe, much less safe than others in the neighbourhood. This in itself fully justifies the introduction of the modal filter. While therefore it is true that traffic coming from or going to the A36 can no longer use one of the routes previously available for the purpose, the point made under claim number 4, this is entirely appropriate because that route privileged drivers over pedestrians to the serious detriment of the latter. The A36 traffic can still use the trunk road, that is to say, the rest of the A36 as it should.
Thank you. Well timed. Are there any questions for Timothy Lloyd? Let's start with Anna, and then we'll go to Joanna.
Hi, Timothy. Thank you for your speech. So I understand this was around the dangerousness of the surrounding roads. I'm the ward councillor for the Chew Valley, and I will say that speeding and dangerous roads is the #1 concern. We get a lot of resistance around people saying that because there's not been serious accidents reported, that it doesn't count as a dangerous road. Would you agree that people don't often report near misses? So using serious accidents alone as a parameter isn't enough, and we need to consider other things when we describe a road as dangerous or less dangerous?
I would agree with that, which is why, although I've mentioned the one documented case of a serious accident, I've mentioned other near misses and less serious accidents where, as you say, it may not have been reported.
Joanna?
Thank you for your statement, Timothy. You said at the beginning that this was about displaced traffic onto less safe roads. Can you explain again?
I said that this is the issue that seemed to me to arise from point 3 in the objection document. The assertion was that traffic previously using Sydney Road and New Sydney Place had been displaced onto less safe roads. My proposition is that it has been displaced from a less safe road.
So, and you were very concerned about school children. So, do you know how much information we have about, again, North Road, and how many young people are cycling to and from the university and the schools at the top of Claverton Down, and how they have now been impacted by more traffic, which was clearly the data that was in this report, showing that there is more traffic now on North Road? And do we know how many near misses or accidents have happened to those young people going to those destinations?
There is, the data, I think, show marginally more traffic on North Road at one point. I don't have any knowledge about near misses or accidents on North Road, and I don't know, so far as I know, the data before the decision maker didn't include any such information.
There does seem to be very little information about cycling in these reports. Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions? We now have Alistair Gavin Douglas, please.
Thank you. Good morning. I was born in Bath, excuse me, and have spent 56 years working within the city. My wife and I well remember many perceived inconveniences when previous access roads were changed to pedestrian and cyclists only. For example, Union Street and the Royal Crescent, and more recently Partley Bridge and Milsom Street, all now sacrosanct for preserving safe space for pedestrians, the disabled and cyclists, with increasing vehicular traffic. Do excuse me. We all now allow for that little extra travel time. The same applies for this key LN, but only 4 seconds or possibly 30 in rush hour, and not as claimed in item 7. A very minor inconvenience for the safety of pupils, visitors and hundreds of Bath residents to this key area of Bath. We live near a Bathwick Hill, And as pedestrians and a cyclist myself, like hundreds of others, we regularly use Sydney Road for access to Parkley Street, the city, and lovely Sydney Gardens. Prior to closure, it was a dreadful hazard with through traffic. In addition, from personal experience on foot, we collected grandchildren from St Mary's School. The majority from that school walked, and with the young children, it was very dangerous negotiating Sydney Road when a through route, much safer now. We now collect from King Edward's and see the bad situation with many cars there. So for a short time, there is bound to be some delay on adjoining roads, a maximum 40 seconds maybe on the A36. Statistics say pollution must improve due to the CAS. However, the key is improving safety and health by reducing car numbers, encourage walking and sharing lifts, etc. To take the ETRO out for a small school peak inconvenience, if any, will create one of the most dangerous streets of Bath. The Lib Dems' plan is to make Bath a safer city, and unlike Sydney Road, the A36 is not unsafe at that point, as it is claimed. It is the correct trunk route. Councillor Blackburn claims that two of the schools are against the LN. How can they be? Is it the parent motorists who are against? King Edward's have increased bus use, great, and St Mary's promotes Sydney Road as a safe street. Children are positive about this correct road improvement. Let's take a lead from them. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Are there any questions? Joanna?
Thank you very much for your statement, Alistair. In terms of coming off and on the towpath for cyclists and pedestrians, how easy is that now that the A36 has more traffic on it?
Off and on the towpath for the canal, well, I think an awful lot of cyclists use Sydney Road, and coming from Parkley Street, you cross at the traffic lights towards the Holborn Museum, come up Sydney Road and onto the towpath.
As a cyclist myself who uses that towpath nearly every day, I don't, and in fact the increase in traffic has made that section more dangerous for me. So I did try the new LN. I went up the A36. There are 2 lanes of traffic, which the cycle lane ends.
This is not a factual question, Joanna.
But there are 2 lanes of traffic.
That's it. It's not a factual question.
But there are 2 lanes of traffic,
Stop.
and you can't get across.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on to Clarice Humphreys.
Okay. I'm here as a resident who lives a few minutes away from the LN. I chose to speak to correct misinformation shared by some drivers. Calling claims 3 and 4 misunderstand the aims of the LTM strategy. From the first packed Guildhall meeting in 2020, it was clear the aim is to put traffic back on main roads to enable more walking and cycling. This was central to the LTM strategy. So contrary to claim 3, the LN achieves its aim, putting traffic where it belongs on the main road with its main road infrastructure, including crossings, pavement protections and the segregated cycle lane on Beckford Road. Baines also deserves credit for improvements on main roads since 2019, especially the CAS. Both schools are in the CAS, which improved local air quality. The ETRO data shows air quality outside the LN is unchanged within measurement tolerances. For people from outside the city driving into central Bath, it must be difficult to see the problems pedestrians experience. But as a frequent user of the area, I encountered many. Since the ETRO, I've not experienced previous problems such as high levels of flouting the speed and weight limits, intimidation by drivers annoyed at pedestrians crossing between the drop curbs at the bottom or at the canal, having to stop angry drivers to enable a terrified elderly lady time to cross, being hit by a driver near the dangerous junction at the bottom because his sole focus was on spotting a chance to creep out and not on watching the road ahead, a near miss
you could call it. I didn't report it. Why is a scheme that benefits so many pedestrians misrepresented in Claim 4 as just for a few residents? The schemes for the far wider community, and many I've seen benefit, include school kids, not just safer routes to school, but walking buses on school visits to Bath. Numerous tourists told by Visit Bath to visit New Sydney Place for historic and Bridgerton connections, and by heritage experts to visit for its architecture. Visitors walking to and from hotels and local lets. Students, including 150 in nearby Cleveland House. Routes to the canal, Sydney Gardens and Cham Castle for many, locals and visitors. Nordic walkers, forest school, dog walkers, carnival, Holborn events and many more. Cyclists who now have a safer route to the city centre. However much consultation, and there have been 3 years of endless rounds for those who chose to engage, LN input by resident needs to be translated by engineers into technically appropriate measures. A great example is the remodelling of the top junction, resulting in much needed traffic calming on the A36 and a safer pedestrian crossing experience near 2 schools. I heard some cyclists don't like the layout of this junction, but the purpose of the ETRO is to enable adaptations to be made if the trial shows they're needed. Naturally, not all drivers are happy to be forced to drive within speed limits, but nobody should have to apologise for improving lives for more vulnerable users, a key ETRO criterion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Joanna?
Thank you. I'm sure you've read all the documents. There's a section from the young people that were spoken to at one of the schools, and they didn't sound very supportive of the scheme. I just wondered why that was.
Well, I've seen plenty of young people using it and enjoying using it. And obviously, you know, one has to interpret the reports. But my perception of the people I see on a daily basis using that area, crossing down to the crossing at the bottom, using it's a far safer route from their schools.
But we are talking about these reports, and that's what we call in.
What matters is who uses the route.
You're asking the speaker an opinion. That's not a factual question. You said, why do you think that was? That is an opinion. So I rule the question out. Are there any other questions? Okay. Right, we move on to the next speaker, Robin Allen.
Hopefully that works. The Bath LN programme aims for through traffic to use arterial routes, such as the A36. It's there to stop rat running, to reduce noise and pollution, improving safety and enhancing the local environment for residents. The Greens originally pushed hard for LNs. Now they oppose every LN scheme. The Conservatives under Boris Johnson promoted and funded LNs nationwide. In opposition, they too are against LNs. Today it's the Liberal Democrats and the council officers who are trying to progress with the same sensible policies. Responding to the area-wide consultation on the LNs in 2020, 85% said they agreed with the principle of reducing the dominance of vehicles in residential areas. 84% said they agreed to establish LNs, but they recognised it was necessary to restrict through traffic on certain streets, and 78% agreed that certain trade-offs are required. Based on this response and other data, the Council went ahead with the ZETRO, and contrary to the claim in item 7, the published detailed data on this ZETRO has categorically proved that the scheme is an overwhelming success. So what's caused opposition councillors to call in the plan? That's true. Some living outside Bath might value their own saving of 15 seconds on their commute over and above any factor that affects communities on their route. That's their right. And perhaps some of the councillors that represent wards many miles from central Bath agree with that position. Perhaps opposition councillors are voting against whatever is being proposed by the council, regardless of its merit. That's the political norm. Change is unsettling for some people, but we already have green shoots of progress from this ETRO. Already over 70% of children at Bathwick Primary walk to school. The number's rising, the school's promoting walking to work. At Cares, they've adapted their transport model, and they're already getting a 30% increase, taking cars off the road. North Road will be a quiet road in time. Contrary to the claim in item 2, the historic objection by members of the Bar Spa Gym, that's gone. There are 2% left, and that's when the fees went up. I spoke to the manager, he's got no objection to the plan. First Bus have withdrawn their complaint. The Meltone picture framing gallery on Powlett Road hasn't noticed any difference at all. Bath Orthodontics wasn't able to note a difference, they just like better signage for their business. It's a fact that LNs work. This one has already delivered measurable benefits with fewer vehicles, that's a fact. It will mean improved air quality, more active travel, and it will lead to a stronger sense of community. We have a climate emergency, and as a community, we can pull together to make things better for everyone. Bath Council is steadily improving the lives of its residents, and personally, I thank them for their efforts.
Thank you. Any questions for Robin?
Thank you. Thank you for your statement. As you are aware, the A36 was closed when the data for this report was collected. How do you think the opening of the A36 will impact this data?
Sorry, point of fact there, the A36 was closed for part of the data collection, and it wasn't the part where the data was, where we've been relying on the data. That's just inaccurate.
Yes. Well, I was about to say the same, so do you have another question?
Okay, thank you. Yes?
Yeah, thank you for your statement. You mentioned at the beginning of your speech about different parties supporting LNs, and you mentioned the Green Party and how in Baines they are against this, and in Bristol they're pro-LNs. Do you feel that this call-in, which is about process of the decision, has become political?
It's not a factual question. I'm the chair. I was just about to say the same thing. You do not have to call out. Thank you.
I withdraw my question.
Okay, thank you. Can I address the observers at the back? It is not appropriate to make comments or gesticulate or laugh when people are speaking. It's disrespectful. You are observers, you are not partakers, so please desist. Okay, moving on to Neil McKay, please.
Good morning. Baines' failures in closing the Sydney Road branch of the A36 have left it wide open to legal challenge, and a decision today to allow the ETRO to become permanent will cause Baines yet another loss in court. Baines is a traffic authority with delegated powers for the Department for Transport. Under Section 122 of the Road Traffic Regulation Act, it shall be the duty of every local authority upon whom functions are conferred by or under this Act to secure the expeditious, convenient and safe movement of vehicular and other traffic, including pedestrians. The most fundamental of these responsibilities is clearly safety. Baines knew from records released by FOI that no recorded accidents occurred on Sydney Road in the past 5 years, instead occurring on roads onto which up to 4,500 vehicles a day are being diverted. Data for the past 25 years shows that the A36 Sydney Road branch carried 1/3 of A36 traffic, more safely than the Beckford Road branch. In addition, traffic has increased 20 to 50% on highly unsuitable roads such as North Road and Sham Castle. Baines has therefore deliberately breached its legal obligation to secure safe traffic movement by pushing traffic onto less safe routes. Perhaps the most damning evidence in court will be that of the head of Bathwick St Mary's. The school strongly believes that the Sydney Road closure is negatively impacting children being able to safely walk to their local school. The head teacher believes it is imperative to reopen Sydney Road to keep children safe. Baines is also in breach on expeditious movement.
its own data shows delays, and whilst an average of 30 to 40 seconds delay may appear trivial, it still represents a cumulative delay of nearly 14,000 hours per year, with an economic loss of 135k, which would render the scheme loss-making. Once traffic fully resumes on the A36, losses will go up. Finally, Section 122 stresses the importance of facilitating the passage of public service vehicles. Baines will have difficulty encountering the comment by First Bus that any LTNs push traffic onto main roads and increase traffic, thus delaying bus services and making the car the most attractive option. The recent Sydney Place LTN has pushed a lot of traffic out onto the bottom of Bathwick Hill, delaying service U1 and U2. The courts are not the only sanction. If the Secretary of State considers that an authority is not meeting its network management duty, she can appoint a Transport Director to ensure that the duty is fulfilled. This will also potentially limit transport funding allocations. By driving traffic onto less safe roads without providing alternatives in the fifth most congested city in the UK, Baines is demonstrating its incompetence. The panel therefore needs to defer any decision on this ETRO until the full effect of traffic resuming on the A36 has been analysed, a full safety assessment has been conducted on the effects on boundary roads, and the Council has assessed its liabilities on breach of Section 122 responsibilities. In this context...
Just to bring your question to halt now, you have a red light.
In this context, any decision to press ahead should be challenged as Wednesbury unreasonable.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Neil? Joanna?
Thank you very much for your statement, Neil. As you say, the right measures in the right place. Why do you refer to Sydney Road as the Sydney Road branch of the A36?
It was always the A36 until very recently when, I think it was during 2021, it was declassified by the Council in order to make this particular LTN happen. If you looked at the signs at the bottom of North Road, which were there for 2 decades up until 2026, right, they were actually showing that if you wanted to follow the A36 towards Bristol, you went down Sydney Road.
June?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch the last bit. You referred to the Wednesbury something or other?
Yeah, forgive me, I am an engineer, not a lawyer, but if it is an action committed that it is plainly that no sensible person could have taken that action, then it is considered Wednesbury unreasonable.
And could that be, if that were breached, would it...
Certainly, I would suggest that taking the decision to press on with making it permanent, without considering safety, without considering the increase in traffic, without, as some people will say, considering the impact on wider equalities. Right?
Yeah, can you bring your comments to conclusion, please? I think you've
would
answered
be
the question.
Wednesbury unreasonable.
I just wondered if there could be any consequences to the Baines Council if this were proven or something.
June, the gentleman has already said he's not a lawyer, so I don't really think he can
No,
answer that
fair
question.
enough. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question for you. Sir, you mentioned the figure of 1,400 at the start of your talk. I was unclear as to how you got to that figure.
1,400, I'm just trying to, 4,500, right? So if you actually look at the way in which the traffic is going, right, unlike as said by one of the other speakers, it hasn't disappeared, right? It has gone onto other roads. So at the moment, 3,000 vehicles have disappeared from Sydney Road. They're now all going up Shamcastle Lane or North Road or down Bedford Road. The actual change is plus 14 cars. And that data was taken in November when the A36 was reopened. And if you compare that data with the baseline data, the traffic coming down the A36 was 1,500 vehicles per day lower. Hence my figure that I believe that the true figure of displacement will be, which is currently being measured as 3,000, will go up to 4,500.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you very much. The next speaker is Tim Warren. Are you staying there, Tim? You happy there?
Thank you, Chair. As long as you're happy, I'm quite comfortable here, thank you. I think the first thing to talk about today is democracy.
Sorry, Tim. Colin, can you... That's it. You can start again.
Usually I don't get stopped. You like me to carry on so you can't hear me. I think the big thing to mention today first is democracy. The majority of people seem to think this process has not been very democratic. I know the Liberal Democrats pride themselves on being a listening council. If they have been listening, I'm not sure they've heard anything. Just in answer to one of the previous speakers about Boris Johnson thought they were great LTNs, I'm delighted for him. Not all of them are. There's one close to me, Queen Charlton, which works. So I think the Liberal Democrat Council will be very pleased with that, and it does work. So I'm not against all LTNs, just this one. The problem with this one, it favours the few that live there, close, against the cost of the many that don't. Just going back now to losing cars using the buses. I mean, just use Claverton, for instance, as an example here. It's a very infrequent bus service, which has just been reduced by 40%. It's a little bit hypocritical that the council encourages you to use buses, yet cut all the subsidies for North East Somerset, all the subsidies. So this now makes their car trips longer, and most of them, you can't walk from there, it's difficult to cycle there. I don't think the issue of the time is the big deal. The big deal is more the other end for the people that live just outside of the LTN, because the traffic's been displaced. When people are waiting, it might only be for 4 minutes, 5 minutes, but they're sitting there in their cars, they may turn them off, they probably don't, so you're spitting out fumes and causing problems elsewhere. So why carry on with it? This is the question, which I don't really know. NO2 air quality data previously to this introduction of the scheme was significantly below both the national and BAME's objectives. So it obviously wasn't done for air quality. There's no evidence of speeding in the area, and 76% of people are against the scheme. I think the big thing, the idea is to reduce traffic. The majority of people, and I haven't stood there and counted cars, believe that there's no traffic reduction overall, just displacement. That's, I think, the thing. Locally, there's 33 houses that are positively affected, almost 500 neighbouring properties that aren't. They're negatively affected. So there's opposition for the school, Barthwick St Mary's School. I believe even First Bus objected. We don't know what the cost is going to be. So I think all this needs looking at again, please. So I'd ask you, please, today, to put democracy first, rather than, we've heard about politics earlier, so put democracy first, not politics. Think again, and please take notice of all the people. Thank you.
I think the comment about costing will be answered by Mark during his address. Any questions from Fiona?
A question for Councillor Warren. Was he aware that the decision to cut the D2X bus was made by First Bus, not BAME's? And Wacker as well.
I am indeed. However, it doesn't mean there's any more buses. Whoever cuts it, there's still no buses. And the previous decision from this council was to cut all the subsidies for North East Somerset.
Can I say there are some subsidies for some of the buses in North East Somerset?
Okay. Yeah, okay. I've been advised that we should keep the questions relevant to Sydney Road, which seems like a very sensible piece of advice. Joanna.
I'm delighted that Boris Johnson put in livable neighbourhoods and worked hard to do that. And I remember at the time of that happening, so thank you for that. My question is, do you know what engagement BAME's has done to work with the bus companies on New Sydney Road's closure?
To be honest, no, I don't. I just know that the buses aren't very happy.
Anna?
Thank you, Councillor Warren. You mentioned about speeding, no evidence of speeding, and yet I was under the impression there was a speed watch in the area. So are you not aware of that data, or are you not aware there was a speed watch?
No, my belief from what I've read was there was no evidence of speeding.
But
if I'm wrong, I withdraw it.
I do understand there was a mention of speed watch, and also that one speaker was saying that they had a police officer capturing data. Is it possible we could get that data? No?
I'm sure we have that data, yes, not a problem. Okay.
I mean, if I may answer that, Chairman, the data I was receiving, especially from local residents, was that there was no evidence of speeding. And if I'm wrong, I withdraw.
Okay, that's fine. Certainly one of the speakers earlier on talked about speeding, I remember, so it clearly does exist, I think, in some people's opinions anyway. Okay, so we move on to Dr. Ian Orpen. Excuse me, before you start, can the chair have one, please? No problem.
Just Chair, if I could just go to the Chair. Thank you very much for handing this out. I mean, clearly you're not a lawyer here to advise the panel, so I appreciate that you're giving some clarification, but I will be advising the panel on any legal issues and any Wednesday reasonable and judicial review. So with the panel, I just would just take the view that I will be giving that advice to you, and that really, as much as it's been provided, I would ask you to ignore it. Okay, it's not relevant for this purpose of this speech. Well, it's not. This individual is not a legal advisor, and he's giving you legal advice. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm just giving you the advice that I don't think it should be taken into account. Okay. Right. Right. Okay.
Chair.
But that's my legal advice.
Chair, I'm afraid I have to comment. I think that legal advice is inappropriate in these circumstances.
Well, I'm happy to go along with the intention of the speaker. So, the legal advice is there for those who wish to hear it. When you're ready, sir.
Oh, sorry. May I just say, though, that that was the word, the Wednesbury, I didn't quite understand from the speaker before. So if, it's a shame. So I think it must have a bearing in some way.
Yeah, as I said just now, June,
Oh,
very happy for the speaker to refer to it. It's not a problem. Okay? When you're ready, sir.
Fine.
Right. Good morning. My name is Dr. Ian Orpen. I live in Barthampton and owned a property in Sydney Road for 27 years until 3 years ago. Today I'm here to make the case that this scheme should be put on hold for two reasons. Firstly, the engagement process, in my view, fails the Wednesbury reasonableness test, Appendix 1. And secondly, the consultation is likely in breach of the Equality Act by virtue of an inadequate equalities impact assessment. The Council chose a very narrow geographical area for engagement and consultation on the proposed scheme, which ignores residents who will be directly impacted by the closure of Sydney Road. Specifically, as an example, the decision to exclude the residents of North Road, including those whose properties are within 40 feet of Sydney Road, appears to fail the Wednesbury reasonableness test. How can that decision be reasonably justified? I have four questions about this. What were the grounds for such a narrow definition? 2, what advice did the Council seek to come to this conclusion? What guidance did they use for this approach, and did they seek legal advice? Appendix 2 has a list of names and addresses in North Road directly affected by this failure of engagement. We're happy to have their details shared in public. In my roles in the NHS, I have seen hundreds of equality impact assessments. Having reviewed EQIAs, as an abbreviation for the phrase, for this scheme, I believe that the Council is likely in breach of its public sector equality duty under the Equality Act 2010. Anybody who previously regularly used Sydney Road to go about their daily lives is a legitimate stakeholder in the scheme and therefore should be considered in an EQIA. In particular, older people, people with disabilities, children and women are directly impacted by this scheme. Sydney Road was the direct route to the south of the city for all those people living on North Road and along Warminster Road and in Barthampton. There is no evidence that these groups in these areas were considered in the EQIA. My request is that the scheme is put on hold to allow a full engagement and consultation to ensure all of those who need to be considered are involved. Specifically, a comprehensive EQIA needs to be performed. Further engagement will allow a modification of the scheme, removing the road closure and replacing it with significant traffic calming measures. This would still deliver a livable neighbourhood, but without the harmful consequences of the current arrangement of displaced traffic onto boundary roads. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ian? Joanna?
Thank you very much for your statement, Ian. You talk about the EQIA and various areas. You haven't mentioned the east of Bath, and again, the east of Bath accesses that area through the towpath. Yes. What is your experience of those accessing this area from that towpath? And, and have they been consulted in this process? Because I'm not aware of any of that in this document.
That was my point, really. I haven't given a comprehensive, detailed list of those who weren't included, because time doesn't allow that. But we walk along that towpath, and we have noticed that access. The school, as we've already evidenced, the school have major concerns about this. It's in the stakeholder engagement documents of this in the report. Well, yeah, not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of.
Lots of questions. So Jess, and then June, and Anna, have you have a question as well? All right, so 3 questions. Jess.
Thank you, Ian. Just responding to your point about the extent of consultation on North Road, could you explain a bit more about that? Was that they didn't receive a letter on it?
Yeah, so the list...
It's very quiet here. I'm really sorry, sitting behind you, I find it hard.
Oh, sorry. I'm just asking Ian to say a little bit more about
North Road
and where
you've got a list of 7 names on Appendix 2. I'm also aware that none of these, North Road was not included in the engagement process at all. 18 of the 19 properties between the Warminster Road on North Road, between the Warminster Road and Cleveland Walk, have signed a joint letter of objection. The only house didn't sign its name was recently moved individuals, and I'm not sure how much they were aware of what was going on. Manda Rigby went round to see Stephen and Leslie Kenwood in January 2024, had a meeting with them, and in that meeting told them, and I have it in front of me here.
I think the question's been answered.
Okay.
Can you stop there, please? Yes?
And also, Ian, just to draw out that in the consultation report, it does refer to the number of responses that mentioned impacts on North Road as a theme. So do you accept that this has at least come out to some extent in the consultation? Well,
in the consultation, but not in the engagement. That's the point. They didn't get asked at the time the scheme was being designed. They didn't know about it until it was going to be implemented. That's the point. And so how can that possibly be reasonable?
Okay, thank you. June?
Thank you. I feel like going back to the question that I asked the previous speaker, because you've given some explanation. What would the consequences be if Baines are found actually to have breached this Wednesbury reasonableness test?
Well, again, I'm not a lawyer, but it has legal precedent. It's been established in law since 1948. So it is clearly, to me, in my humble opinion, puts the council at risk of a legal challenge.
Right,
thank you.
Can't have.
Okay, so we move on to Anna and then Robin.
Thank you very much. So I'm looking at the data set, table 3 on page 36, about the consultation, and it's got a split of 51% female, and I know you mentioned about women as a group to be consulted on. And you also mentioned the elderly.
Yes.
And as a percentage, it was 59% the respondents were over 55.
Yeah.
So is that not what you were
No,
after?
well, it's not. The point is the EQIA needs to consider all those people affected. Living in Barthampton, we were considered visitors, so there was no discussion, and the same applies to people along the Warminster Road. They were not considered in the same way. So, depending on where you live, but in Barthampton, we're definitely not considered at all in it, and yet it is, Barthampton has an elderly population, so not included. And regarding women, yes, women were consulted, but there's a specific issue around women who have been disadvantaged. At the public meeting to which Leader of the Council and Manda Rigby were invited but were not able to come, we heard from a woman who lives on Sydney Road in Clan House and who now feels trapped there because it's dark at night, she lives alone, she's frightened because there's less traffic, and that has not been considered.
But this meeting is about the decision and not the actual project.
But you're asking me...
And I'm asking
sorry.
a question about women and elderly people, and I'm saying that the data is possibly against what you're saying.
We'll bring this to a close, because I don't think you necessarily have to justify the work that's going on, so I'm going to leave it there.
Okay, sure.
Robin?
Yes, it's looking for some legal advice. Clearly, we're having reference here to the public sector equality duty under the 2010 Act. There's reference made by Dr. Orpen as to whether or not these EQIAs actually reach a standard, and I've worked with Dr. Orpen in the past. He's well aware of how EQIAs happen. For the record, can we have some legal advice on the status of these EQIAs within this report in case there is any future legal challenge?
I think at the time when we actually come, when the panel start to consider their decision when they've heard from everybody, then I will give that legal advice at that time. I think obviously there is in the report, and you'll be see what officers have done and to undertake those equality impact assessments. So that's what I will do at the time when we're actually at a point where we are considering the decision and having the debate and discussion.
Sorry, Chair, it's really hard to hear back here.
Yeah,
Didn't get that, sorry.
Didn't you get it? I'm very sorry. I was sorry. Can we just get a bit closer to the... I was just actually saying to the chair and to the panel that I will give that legal advice to them at that time. It's really important to understand that all of the equality impact assessments that are in the reports will have been considered at that time, and I think that's part of that consultation process that would have been undertaken. Now, I think it's really important that I understand the questions that this is why it becomes very difficult when people start raising these legal issues and putting that to the panel when they want to discuss it and listen to those issues. But ultimately, I will give the advice to the panel and to the chair at the appropriate time.
So my challenge really is about the process here.
Sorry, it's not a question to you, I'm afraid.
Okay,
It's
right.
chair. You go through the chair.
Well, I can clarify my question.
But I mean, I don't know whether you want to take a question, Chair, on that point.
No, I do not. Thank you. Joanna, last one.
Sorry, last
Oh,
question.
sorry,
Going back to representative polling, we've just heard about the EQIA, but you're in the reports is what we're looking at is the process. Yeah. Do you think there should have been representative polling to look at that data?
Yeah, okay. So I'm sorry, you started that with "do you think?" So it's not a factual question.
Was representative polling undertaken?
There was not. No, there was not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused by this because I was aware that there was a public consultation over 6 months and there's been responses from Barthampton, Claverton, which I represent, and others. So I'm unclear how it could be thought that people in North Road had not been consulted when they could obviously...
So they were not engaged. The engagement came first, the consultation came second. That's the process. So they were not engaged in they had no say over any design of the scheme, involvement in it, the implications of that. That's the thing. The council chose a very narrow, as I said before, very narrow area. Did not include North Road, and that, my point is, how is that reasonable?
Okay, you've made that point about 3 times.
Sure.
It's absolutely fine, no problem.
Good.
Thank you for your time. Treat everybody equally, please. Okay, we move on to the next one, which is John Avent.
Sorry? Thank you. Sydney Gardens opened in 1795 to provide an open space for amusement and relaxation for residents of Bath. Most beautiful livable neighbourhoods back all that time ago. Baines sought to fix a problem that did not exist. Baines have failed with this LTN. They failed to set acceptable acceptance criteria for the experiment, failed to engage, listen and consult effectively with local residents, failed to implement a meaningful trial by building out the scheme from the outset, demonstrating a predetermined outcome, failed to conduct an adequate equalities impact assessment on those affected, failed to deliver safer roads, pushing traffic onto less safe ones, failed to deliver net benefit by ignoring significant congestion and increased safety risk on boundary roads, failed to improve public transport options, only impeding them, failed to recognise the area was already a pleasant, livable neighbourhood, failed to demonstrate poor air quality, noise levels or safety, failed to recognise the presence of green open spaces of Sydney Gardens, failed to achieve public support or that of local primary schools and businesses, failed to provide net improvements for residents in the Bathwick or Bathhaven North Wards. On the Nolan principles, Cabinet members and the Livable Neighbourhood team have failed to act with selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, leadership. Councillor Guy is open to scrutiny on all of the above. He wrote to a Sydney Place resident confirming his, I quote, personal commitment to deliver the scheme. Councillor Guy references Councillor Rigby when writing to this resident, stating, Manda could not have worked harder on your behalf to keep your project at the top of the list. Despite this scheme being 12th on the shortlist, with marginal, if any, benefit, in delegating authority to Councillor Rigby, the scheme suddenly became 4th on to be rolled out. This was clearly a politically driven fait accompli led by Councillor Guy. There was to be only one outcome, no real consultation. Councillor Rigby refused to enter discussions with concerned residents and ignored my emails.
Can I just stop you there? It's not helpful to mention Councillor Rigby or Councillor Guy because they're not here to defend themselves.
Apologies.
Please refrain.
Public records show donations to the Liberal Democrats from apparent pro-Liberal Democrat LTM supporters. Is this a condition for engagement with those against or objecting to the scheme? A press statement announcing the scheme has been made permanent. Occurred before the single-member decision was made in haste and before the effects of the A36 reopening were felt. These are all appalling reasons to impose increased congestion and safety risk on 490 households and the wider public for the questionable benefit of as few as 33. We expect democracy, we expect consultation. I urge the Council to remove this LTN for the extensive failings and perversion of process noted, or at the very least extend the trial and carry out true independent monitoring and consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well timed. Okay. Any questions for John? Joanna?
Thank you, John, for your statement. From the census data, what is the socio-economic status of people living in New Sydney Road?
Sorry, could you repeat it?
From census data, do you know what is the socio-economic status of people living in New Sydney Road?
Well, I mean, if you're referring to it being a sort of small, affluent street, is that's it?
Just wondering, what is the... I mean, is it a very wealthy street or is it a poor street? I mean, in terms of Bath demographics,
it's a wealthy street of wide pavements, big townhouse properties, set back from the street.
Right. Any other questions? Thank you, John. Okay, we move on to the last speaker, Alistair Barron.
Thank you, Chair. For the Council to make the SPLN permanent, it's necessary to show due process. I believe the Council has failed to do this in the following 3 areas. Process failure 1. The infrastructure for this LN was built out in final form before the start of the trial. This makes the trial meaningless because the whole idea of trialling is to evaluate if a scheme works, and if it does, and only then, go forward to a full build-out. No proper justification for building the full build-out was put forward. Costs of over £300,000 were incurred unnecessarily. Building permanent infrastructure incurs higher removal costs. Low-cost temporary trial installations would have been appropriate. In summary, you skipped over the trial and built out a permanent project right at the start.
Actually, excuse me to interrupt you. This is not true. These are temporary structures. They can easily be removed.
Let's move to process failure 2. Relevant groups not sufficiently consulted. The majority of the 4,000 plus vehicle movements a day displaced will use the A36, which runs alongside the Bathwick estate. So the 450 households in the Bathwick estate, by the way in the same ward as Sydney Place, clearly have a major interest, as do those whose lives are affected in other wards. For that reason, it would have been common sense and entirely reasonable to consult with the affected groups in depth. Again, not to do so is irrational and procedurally unfair. Process failure 3. The SPLN met the criteria for a key decision. A key decision is required where the decision impact is, quotes, significant in terms of effects on communities living or working in an area comprising 2 or more wards. That is the case here. The Bath Avon wards, as well as Bathwick and others, are significantly affected. Yet the decision was given single-member decision status, denying a legal right to affected communities. In summary, the Council has failed to show due process in the 3 areas above, I believe, and is therefore judicially unfair. You have heard this morning many reasoned and evidenced objections to this scheme. I urge you to make your decision on the merits of what you have heard, bearing in mind the Council's vision of improving people's lives. Some of you may be under pressure to toe a party line, but I trust that you will see that this scheme will harm far more people than the few whose lives are improved by it. Thank you. I would be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Alistair. Are there any questions? June and then Joanna.
Thank you. You obviously have a lot of concern about this. Did you voice and give and say what your concerns were to the council, to your local councillors?
Yes, Councillor Rigby and myself live in the same estate, and it's important to keep in good consultation mode. Although I don't like what's happened, I still respect very much local councillors. And therefore, it's not sensible for me to bottle up the feelings that I have. It's sensible to discuss them in a reasonable way. We started off in an unreasonable way with the previous SMO, David, who was the... And I wrote to him because...
You've answered the question. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Joanna.
First of all, Chair, I am challenged by you saying that the curbs which have been built out and have been put in substantially would be easy to remove.
Sorry, point of fact, they're bolt down, they are removable, and they will be replaced.
Thank you, Councillor.
My factual question then is, could have planters could have been used in this area, and a full installation
Planters can be used, they're more expensive.
A full installation was put in place, and that therefore could other measures have been used for this trial, do you think?
Well, the fact that £306,000, which was identified in a Freedom of Information request, was spent, seems to me to be excessive when planters would cost a few thousand.
The planters cost more than the bollards. To be factually accurate, the planters cost more than the bollards.
Okay, I'm going to draw a veil over that. I think the question's been answered. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, could I ask another?
You can.
I sort of get the impression you feel that there might have been other solutions that could have dealt with the issues surrounding these 2 roads, basically, and what would appear to be...
That's not a factual question. You're asking...
sorry. Do you feel that there are other solutions could have been put in place?
Yes.
Do you know? Are there?
No, I don't think so, Jim. Good effort, but I don't think so.
And yes,
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Okay, that's the end of the public part of the meeting. We now move on to item 7, and item 7 is a statement from the lead call-in member for a maximum of 10 minutes, Colin Blackburn, and be sympathetic with him because he was a hip replacement last Friday. So, are you in pain? Okay, when you're ready.
Good morning, everybody. Firstly, my apologies that I couldn't walk, wheel or cycle here today. I know this is a preferred method of movement, and as much as Baines may force this issue, and my hip replacement is just a temporary restriction, there are many of our residents for whom this is not possible, and they still need access to services, facilities and our city. I was first made aware of this LN in late 2023, when a closed consultation was taking place, directed at only a select few properties, all in line to benefit from this road closure, not a modal filter or other method of improvement previously discussed when this area was consulted on more generally. I was surprised, to say the least, that this even appeared on the horizon. It was seemingly bumped up the list after a private email between the council leader and a resident. Promises were made. I wasn't surprised, though, as the hundreds of residents this was about to affect who had no idea what their elected council was up to. Whilst I was out the country, I brought this to a few people's attention, and before you know it, 4,000 signatures are on a petition saying, hold on. But no, a promise is a promise, and Chrissy was expecting this done within a year of the last election. So it was bumped up the list. A road I've used personally for over 40 years was magically reclassified, and instead of a trial, a full road alteration was constructed. I initially thought someone had misread the instructions of an ETRO, but as you've heard from many speakers today, this LN has had a very murky process. An LN is meant to bring improvements to air quality, not pass it on and increase it elsewhere. It should reduce congestion. Well, of course, closing a road gives immediate reduction for a few, but not to those areas it is displaced to. It should also create healthier, fairer streets for everyone. Does this LN do what it says on the tin? No. And if we allow it in its current form, you will lose the goodwill of all those who believe in democracy, transparency and fairness. We're in the UK's 5th most congested city. We have merely been moving the deck chairs. It doesn't change the fact that he's not improved the movement options. I want to highlight to the committee, all of the committee, how our residents are observing this situation as it has been playing out. After numerous call-ins over a number of years, I have rarely had much public feedback or engagement about the actions being taken. But for this one, I've had emails and phone calls from residents across our authority, some affected by this particular area, but many others who see what has been going on and felt the need to reach out and comment. I want to quote a couple for you. Firstly, to have a plan agreed just before the A36 reopening on the 1st of March was indeed cunning. There has been very little traffic coming along the A36, so it was not a period to have a real test of the effects of the closure. Next one. First off, I've never written to any politician, local or national, before. I read about the exposure of this rigged scheme. I have tried to talk to my local councillor, who doesn't care to answer questions she doesn't like or agree with. I have suspected for some time that someone on the council has a personal agenda and is using their position to achieve it. I fear what this person or persons are going to try and do next. Another email. I'm a resident who bikes in on my commute into Bath daily. I read this article and I thought to thank you so much for standing up for democracy and common sense. So I thought I'd email this one back and ask it how they were affected. The reply came. As a daily commuting biker, I've found the increased congestion as I try to go up and access Sydney Place has made me feel unsafe. Coming down Sydney Road, I have had to dodge pedestrians in the middle of the road. Another one said to me, most children feel less safe walking to school. For example, my 12-year-old son no longer cycles due to the increased traffic. The Council's claim of improving life for residents is contradicted by increased danger on key roads. Kevin Guy's vision of safer streets is not being delivered. Instead, routes like Beckford Road, Sydney Place, North Road and Warminster Road are now more hazardous. This is our residents. I even took a phone call at 8:15 on Monday this week from an 80-year-old resident who firstly told me he doesn't do computers, but he'd read about the call-in in the paper and the issues, and he stated he didn't want his taxes being used to support private roads for the privileged few. Also, Chair, I know you received an email late last night just about from a supporter in Shamcastle Lane, but I just wanted to make sure you were aware that there were 10 formal objections have now been lodged from residents in that lane, and in fact, even with a blind bend on it, they've had a 35% increase in traffic, according to the data. I think you get a flavour of how our residents are viewing this LM and the actions being taken around the whole livable neighbourhood delivery. As an independent, I try my best to engage all and bring a reality into what can and can't be achieved. This administration needs to hear what our residents are saying. I was surprised when I lodged this call-in to find that before it had even been publicly announced, a few supporters and beneficiaries of this LN scheme had lodged their request to speak and banked 50% of the speaker slots. In 10 years as a councillor and having led numerous cross-party democratic call-ins, I was flabbergasted by the seeming manipulation of the system and the inside track that have been afforded. As you've heard from speakers here today, manipulation of consultations of data has been strewn all over this particular action. I do want to quote one of the beneficiaries and speakers here today when she wrote to Council saying, "The trial period would monitor and assess traffic behaviours. The current concerns of residents in neighbouring roads would be carefully observed and any negative impacts addressed during the process." I do not believe this has happened at all. The local councillors have failed to engage those residents with concerns and no negative impacts have been discussed, let alone addressed. Dumping on your neighbours is never a good look. It might not have been intended, but seemingly it is happily being taken. The recent Camden Busgate withdrawal shows the disarray we are currently in when trying to navigate the best course of action. Whilst I and many others believe there are some really compelling opportunities to implement LNs, but not without wider joined-up thinking, with genuine options for residents to use alternative methods and proper consideration given to safety, especially those of the cyclists these are meant to serve, as well as the younger persons going to the schools, whom we must not endanger any further than they might already be experiencing. A seeming rush to access funding is foolhardy and could leave us liable to all sorts of claims and issues. I have a level of sympathy for Councillor Elliott. He has been past this one at a time when his focus has been fully on the budget that he's just presented to Council. He has been expected to make a single-member decision on something so key for so many without having a background in transport. There are mountains of information relating to this, digesting all of that from the consultations and whether they have been handled by the book, data on traffic flows with road closures thrown in, safety considerations that have surfaced by cyclists using this LN, displacement on the less safe roads, etc., air pollution and the lived experience of those on the sharp end of this displacement, as well as understanding the economic impact. Clearly, that has not yet been known and will not be fully apparent until the A36 is fully reopened. What was the rush? Is it the thought that Baines have spent the money building this fully straight away and that the Wecker elections might mean a change of course or scrutiny over allocated funds? Was it a simple rush to beat the traffic? The A36 was about to reopen and lay bare the true impact and traffic may become more intolerable. I don't know. I certainly do not envy Councillor Elliott for being past this one, and I genuinely feel we need to help get rid of that pressure from him and suspend the decision. It is a key decision. Surely Cabinet at least should be making it when armed with the complete facts of a full and transparent trial. The infrastructure has been built, we don't yet have a traffic circulatory and management plan, and without that, any of these interventions are piecemeal and less effective and won't be as beneficial as they could be. I call upon the committee to refer this decision back to Councillor Elliott and ask for a reconsideration based on the concerns expressed today that this trial has not had a chance to show its true effects yet.
Thank you, Colin. Right, are there any questions for Colin? Joanna?
Thank you for your statement. Can you tell me how long an ETRO can be in place before a decision has to be made?
18 months.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just a quick question to you, Chair. Are the questions about the speech or about the call-in specifically?
I think you can do either.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. A question was around the money you said for Baines needs to spend it. Am I right in thinking this is a WECA-funded project?
I believe so. It will be if we meet the criteria.
Okay, so your assumption that it's Baines to spend WECA's money, is that what you meant to say? I don't understand.
Baines make the proposals of what they want to do, and then if they can meet the criteria and demonstrate it to WECA, they will either be refunded the monies they've already spent or given the monies to complete the process.
Yeah, Mark?
Factually inaccurate. We don't have to refund any money. Any money we have already spent on this scheme will not be refunded to WECA.
But was it WECA's money that we've spent so far?
While I've got you, Mark, will you address these financial issues in your 10 minutes?
I will attempt to do so.
Fine. Joanna?
How are cyclists coming off the towpath affected by the LM?
The reports that I'm getting, I've talked to a lot of cyclists who are coming off that towpath, and we have a cycle lane that's been built on Beckford Road coming up. The potential to turn left off the towpath, go uphill, join the traffic lights and go down onto the new LN is not working for those certainly with non-standard bicycles. Certainly that's the reports I've been given. The desire line to come off and cross that road and go down Beckford Road towards the traffic lights is now more hazardous because of the increased traffic. And that's the reports I'm getting from cyclists.
And coming the other way, what's the impact of that? I mean, I would assume a cyclist would have to then join all the traffic and try and get across it.
The problem you've got coming the other way is you can't join the towpath if you use that other way. You can't use that safe LN and then join a heavier trafficked A36 Beckford Road and then cross it to get onto the towpath. That doesn't make any sense.
And do we have any data of how many people are using the NCN4 to travel every day? Haven't seen it in here.
I've not seen that.
Okay, and then my final question to you is about the circulation plan. I know that this scrutiny panel has several times during 2024 asked for a date for a circulation plan. We have now been told that the circulation plan is subject to funding. When will the circulation plan be brought forward so that the present piecemeal approach to delivering the livable neighbourhood process is avoided?
Like you, I'm unaware of when that is going to come.
Yeah, can we just stick to the...
I'm just
I know you are. I'm not, it's Joe I'm talking to. Can we just stick to the Sydney Road thing and not talk about the circular direction plan? Right, okay. Anna? Then I think...
Councillor Batman, we haven't worked together. We've not been on the same panel. I will say that I feel a bit uncomfortable about some of the things you've said. And I feel like a phrase of today's meeting is, I'm not a legal expert, but... some of the comments you made were, for me, bordering on reputation damage, defamation about a certain colleague of ours. No, my question to you, my factual question, was what evidence do you have for this murky direct quote situation?
I can go back right to the original process of engagement.
So you have
as
evidence?
you've heard today, didn't engage enough people that were going to be involved or affected by this.
But not engaging isn't evidence of corruption?
If you feel my word murky needs to be withdrawn, I will withdraw it.
I think it wasn't just murky. I'll go back to the statement, but thank you very much.
You obviously have some concerns about procedure, following on from Anna's question. Have you taken these concerns to anybody at any time?
I've tried to, but ultimately I'm not the ward councillor for this area. In my summing up, I'll tell you why I'm the person that seems to have come forward in this calling, but ultimately a lot of the noises are that people were not feeling represented, which is why I got calls.
Jess, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So just picking up on part of your statement, Colin, and also one of the points in the call-in statement, which says that the council has not engaged those suffering from the livable neighbourhood and only those in support. However, the public consultation report and the engagement, the stakeholder engagement report, does, I think, really spell out the concerns that people have about the LN and represents the arguments both in favour and against. So what I wanted to ask is, what do you feel the council should have done differently in their approach to engagement leading up to this decision?
We go right back to the process and that engagement and how we reach out to all the people affected, from the people we hope we're benefiting in terms of cyclists, and genuinely getting that data. I don't see any representation of those towpath users and cyclists and how they are reporting to us they're negatively affected. Now, this was not the outcome we want from this. So to push through and sign it off when there are clearly holes in that process, that to me is a problem.
Hal?
The second reason for the call-in, the decision does not satisfy the DFT guidance for consultation. Could you say a bit more about that?
Not without my notes in front of me, Hal, if I'm honest. I mean, it's incredibly detailed. The DFT have brought out reams of documents about the process of consultation, about development of LNs, and having looked into it, just fundamentally felt that that process hadn't been followed.
Okay. I have one question. On the third bullet point, you say that there has been an increase of 50% in traffic. You don't specify which roads have been increased by 50%, and you don't give raw numbers. So is there any chance that I can have at least one of those two?
Beckford Road is the road I'm referring to there.
That's not correct. It's not a 50% increase on Beckford Road. There is not. That is not in the report.
Okay.
So, yeah, thank you. St Anne's Way, I already quoted 35% on Shamcastle Lane is a figure. I've not got all of those in front of me, Chair, and I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to give you exact answers.
So just on that last one, you thought, I talked about raw numbers. Do you have any raw numbers? Because some of these roads are very, very small, aren't they?
I think part of your problem with this is about the data that's being used and saying it was being used because the A36 was open for a little bit. No, the mass avoidance that people know that the A36 with Cleveland Bridge and the time it takes for that traffic to re-establish itself and really genuinely understand displacement effects, we don't know that yet. And that's clearly coming down the line.
Yeah, I suspect Councillor Elliott will answer that in his 10 minutes, which is coming up shortly, I hope. Right, there don't appear to be any more questions, so thank you, Colin. I hope that wasn't too painful for you. We move on, I think, to Colin. No, not to Colin, he's had his go. To Mark. When you're ready, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. So, panel, I think removing a lot of the emotion and heat out of this, the decision is actually quite straightforward. A key part of the Livable Neighbourhoods policy is to keep through traffic off minor roads and on main roads. This scheme obviously achieves that, so it meets the policy aim. It has been implemented correctly, legally. That is the advice from our legal team. So the only question becomes, do the disadvantages of the scheme outweigh the meeting of the policy aim? The data shows that the disadvantages of the scheme are not significant. It does openly present them, but it says they're not significant. I therefore decided to agree with the officer recommendation to make the scheme permanent. It really is that simple, and I actually think we could stop there. That's enough to justify dismissing the call-in. However, I'll attempt to address some of the specific points made in the call-in request. I'll try to do that in roughly the order they appear in the call-in notice. I won't be able to address every point in detail, but obviously I'm happy to answer questions. Firstly, I'd like to address the issue of whether decision is constitutional. It is. The assertion is that it should be a key decision. I should note that this isn't my choice or the choice of any elected member. It's a decision for the officers presenting the report, and the monitoring officer is able to then decide to override that if the officer has got it wrong and the monitoring officer hasn't done that. As a side note, I'd also point out that even if it were a key decision, which it's not, it would still be open for that key decision to be made as a single-member decision, so the outcome would be no different anyway. Moving on to the consultation process, extensive engagement has taken place with residents and stakeholders since 2021. I've read the guidance produced, unlike Colin, produced both in March 2024 and on the previous government. It's not that long, it's 20 pages per document. We even meet the more recent guidance. I would argue we thoroughly meet both sets of guidance. I have read them, I'm completely comfortable with that. This includes, we've engaged entirely sensibly for, I would say over-engaged for the size of scheme this is. This includes direct mailings to thousands of households, numerous public meetings, pop-up events, stakeholder consultations, extensive individual communications, and remember that the ETRO process is part of the consultation. I acknowledge that the headline figure of 76% opposition from the wider area, I completely acknowledge that. However, crucially, within the neighbourhood directly impacted by the scheme, 72% of residents support the measures. Opposition predominantly came from outside the immediate area. It's important to stress that engagement was never one-sided. We have actively sought and listened to feedback from all perspectives through the entire process. Regarding the objections for First Bus, initially First Bus provided general concerns about LTNs, not specific objections to the Sydney Road scheme itself. The assertions made in their submission of delays to bus services are not backed up by evidence for this scheme. Similarly, we engaged closely with businesses, addressing their concerns directly. While some businesses raised issues regarding potential disruption, no evidence was provided showing businesses' losses specifically due to this scheme. We remain committed to working with these businesses to support any adaptation to the changes that they need. Concerns about traffic displacement and safety are understandable, but again, the evidence clearly supports the scheme. Prior to this intervention, Sydney Road saw up to 4,700 vehicles daily, mostly disregarding the existing signage designed to prevent such through traffic. Displaced traffic has been carefully monitored, and although Beckford Road has experienced a 35 to 40% increase in traffic volume, this has only translated into journey times being on average 5 to 13 seconds longer. The increase in journey times on Sydney Place portion of the A36 are 20 to 40 seconds longer, depending on the time of day and the direction of travel. The longest increase in average journey time is 50 seconds during peak hours, but that's on Barthwick Street, so I can't for the life of me see how that's attributable to the Sydney Place intervention anyway. Our independent traffic analysis consistently shows that traffic displaced onto main roads like the A36 has remained manageable. Smaller local roads have seen modest increases in traffic. Certainly nothing approaching the significant disruption that some have claimed. Measures are already planned to make some improvements to the scheme based on feedback. All the elements of the scheme are temporary, contrary to what's being said. For example, the build-out at the bottom of North Road, when made permanent, will have some adaptations for cyclists. The data clearly demonstrates that concerns about traffic displacement have been exaggerated and can be effectively mitigated. Council engineers have confirmed that there has been no significant increase in safety risk, and the monitoring shows no detrimental impacts on air quality on those roads that are outside the scheme. Section 4 of the call-in is very odd. It tries to suggest that the only households to benefit are those directly inside the scheme. It even gets that number wrong. It's 185, not 87. It then suggests that all households outside the scheme suffer. I think the use of the word suffer there is a little overwrought. But in any case, that is an unreasonable distinction. The scheme offers substantial and widespread benefits. Reduced noise, improved air quality and safer streets significantly enhance the overall quality of life for the whole community. And the intervention on Sydney Road is not an isolated measure, but fits into our wider Bath Active Travel Master Plan and the Walking, Wheeling and Cycling Links scheme. It forms an essential piece of our strategic plan for a more interconnected and sustainable transport across the city. The Sydney Road scheme strategically aligns with our comprehensive citywide transport management plans, reinforcing our wider goals of sustainability and equity in transport. It is not a standalone measure. On the issue of value for money, an independent and thorough economic assessment using the DFT's established and approved methodology confirms a benefit-cost ratio of 2.02, indicating strong economic value. The signatories to the call-in just seem to be making some numbers up at that point. The trial data used to support making this scheme permanent has been meticulous, independently verified and accounts carefully for temporary disruptions, such as the roadworks on the A36. To be clear, we are not relying on data collected when the A36 was closed. The quality and comprehensiveness of the data gathered far exceed what would typically be required for a scheme of this scale, ensuring decisions are based on accurate and representative evidence. Reports underpinning the permanent adoption of the scheme transparently present evidence and clearly define success criteria. These criteria, reductions in through traffic and increases in active travel, are demonstrably met. Importantly, measurable behavioural change has already occurred. Active travel has increased by 18%, and 88% of the supportive residents indicated a greater inclination to walk or cycle. Additionally, increased school transport usage at King Edwards shows tangible shifts towards sustainable travel habits, reflecting precisely the intended goals of the initiative. Equality has been at the forefront of our assessments. The Equality Impact Assessment rigorously evaluated impacts within and beyond the immediate area, fulfilling the obligations under the Equality Act. Our consultation approach deliberately sought diverse input, ensuring fairness and inclusivity throughout the decision-making process. In conclusion, I carefully weighed up every objection raised in this call-in. The evidence presented overwhelmingly supports the scheme's benefits. Minor inconveniences from slightly increased journey times do not outweigh significant improvements in safety, air quality, community health and well-being. This decision reflects our strategic commitment to building a healthier, more sustainable and equitable community. Ultimately, the minor convenience of drivers, and it's absolutely clear that's what it is, it's a minor inconvenience to drivers, cannot override this. So Sydney Road is in its small but important step towards achieving a citywide transformation in how we manage our roads, traffic and transport. It represents a commitment to future generations to ensure our city is livable, healthy and accessible for everyone, regardless of their mode of transport. Thanks for your attention. I believe there's now an opportunity for questions.
There certainly is. Anna.
Yes, it's me again. So I think I'm getting a feeling that some people, for the consultation process, wasn't what they wanted. And I am super cool, and I've read the Code of Conduct for the DFT. And, and it talks a lot about consultation length, timing, and accessibility. Now, I understand you do pop-ups for your consultation. So and I know that's not a common thing with councils to do pop-up. Could you talk us through a bit more about that? Because that, to me, seems it's fully doing the Code of Conduct.
I am completely confident that this is the most consulted on programme that we've done. It's as a council that WECA told us to stop consulting and get on with it. We have consulted and consulted and consulted. It's been going on since 2021. There is no argument that we did not consult enough and that we did not engage enough. We emailed, is it 3,000 or 5,000 houses? Not emailed, physically mailed. 3,000 houses. You know, it's the kind of engagement that we would not usually do for a scheme of this size and scale. And sorry, you referenced the pop-ups. Yes, we've been having pop-ups inside the route to engage with people directly inside the
And that's not a normal thing?
No, I mean, it's more than we would expect to do for a scheme of this size.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your statement. So I wanted to pick up on one of the issues that's been raised a couple of times today and is also in the engagement report, and that's about congestion and parking on Darlington Road close to Bathwick St Mary's School. So specifically, did you look at this in your decision-making on the livable neighbourhood? And then what do you feel the council can do to address safety concerns around this school?
Yes, I did look at it. We acknowledge that the pick-up and drop-off at cares in Bathwick St Mary's are problematic. This scheme does not make those problems worse. It doesn't improve them. I completely agree. It doesn't make them worse. We are working with the schools on how we help improve that pick-up and drop-off, and we will continue to do that. It is a problem, but it's not. There has also been an uptake, I should point out, in the children reported using school transport at King Edward's, which I think is good, and it provides a safe walking route. So, you know, it is an improvement, but it doesn't solve the problem, and we completely acknowledge that. But that doesn't make this decision invalid.
Yeah. Yes, I was interested to hear that you said, and I'm going to make sure this is a proper question, why did you put so much effort into this LN than you normally do? I'm a bit surprised at that.
Because we were only too aware how controversial it was going to be. I mean, all of these, and it's not this LN above other LNs. It's all LNs are deeply controversial. When I talk about comparing the level of consultation, I mean for traffic schemes in general. But livable neighbourhood schemes are controversial. But we are willing to do difficult things if they are the right things to do. And this is the right thing to do. It is difficult and it is controversial. We completely acknowledge that. But that doesn't make it wrong, and it doesn't make this decision an unreasonable or bad decision.
No, I'm not saying that. May I follow this up with?
Sorry, I realise you're not saying that, but that is what this meeting is about.
I'm just asking the question. I'm not. Would you be prepared to at least let this trial go through to the normal end of 18 months?
That's not a normal end. That's the maximum. And,
okay,
and we need and if we are going to implement it, we have to have done the final TRO, the final traffic regulation order for the implementation. As I say, the infrastructure is going to come out and final infrastructure is going to go in. That has to happen before the end of the 18 months. If we're going to do that, now is when we have to do it. That's why we're doing it now. It's nothing to do with rushing it. It's nothing to do with trying to squeeze it in before the A36 closes. We have to do it now because it doesn't fit in with the timescales otherwise, because we're not allowed to have this meeting during the pre-election period for the WECA election. So, and that would push, and if we push out past the WECA election, we're too late to get it done. So if we're going to make it permanent, that decision has to happen now.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Jess? No, sorry, Robin.
Oh, Robin,
Robin was first, then it's Jess, Joanna and Hal.
Thanks very much. A lot of mention of DFT guidance. I'm going to reference straight through to Department of Transport, the statutory guidance on implementing low traffic neighbourhoods. Also reference the meeting that we had last year, just over a year ago, which was the meeting of this panel on the 19th of February, which was looking at the the livable neighbourhood scheme and the TRO up at Southlands. And it's, I was vain to quote yourself, but I will do. I said at that point in time that in favour of making neighbourhoods cleaner and safer, that schemes first of all do need to have public support, and that a traffic circulation for the whole of Baines is needed, and particularly Bath. And the reason I said that, and the reason saying that, and a bit of deja vu this time, is that going back to the DOT's guidance, the research shows that while they can work in the right place, and crucially where they are supported, that low traffic neighbourhoods work where they work in the right place and where they are supported, but that it's very clear that that you have to look at, and I'm sorry, I'm just flicking through. You have to look at the effect of low traffic neighbourhoods where they are adversely affecting other areas. And I think one of the weaknesses of the strategy in Baines is that the circulation plan that has been suggested for well over a year, that fits in with the Department of Transport.
Is there going to be a question?
Guidance. It is. Do you agree that? Saying it's the circulation plan. It's the parallel is to in planning, that individual planning decisions are made within the context of a local plan. Low traffic neighbourhood decisions, wouldn't you agree, are controversial, but they will work better when they're with an overall circulation plan and overall strategy, particularly when at a micro level, diverting traffic from affluent residential streets inside the LTMs to poorer boundary roads and areas is a criticism and is quite often an effect of putting LTMs in place.
Okay, it won't surprise you to hear that I don't agree. But the reason I don't agree is that I agree that a circulation plan will be a good thing. Absolutely. I want us to have a circulation plan. I'm encouraging us to produce a circulation plan. We need to get the circulation plan done. I absolutely agree with that. It doesn't invalidate this scheme. This scheme is policy compliant. This scheme achieves the aim of removing traffic from a minor road and putting the traffic on a major road. It achieves that aim. So even without any other further policy, it still works and the decision is valid. However, it is also true that we have a number of different schemes, which I would point to the active travel and the Bath walking, wheeling, cycling schemes. This scheme does fit in with those wider Bath-wide schemes. To address Councillor Wright's point about the canal access, we acknowledge that, and it's in the Bath walking, wheeling and cycling scheme. The idea of incremental change so that you can do one thing. If we had the circulation plan, we wouldn't be dropping in everything all at once. You'd still be doing it incrementally. So it doesn't invalidate this scheme. I would also argue that the line about diverting, protecting wealthy areas and diverting to poor areas is just wrong. The first one of these we did was, I think, in Southlands. Are we saying that Southlands is a terribly wealthy area? This is not about that at all. The argument seems to be that we can't do them in wealthy areas. It's just mad. We are not privileging wealthy over poor or poor over wealthy. We are being blind about that. We are looking at these schemes on their merits. So I don't agree with any of your points, no.
Thank you. And Mark, you've partially answered my question. I wanted to pick up the concerns that have come out today, and they're also in the engagement report, about the current situation for cyclists who are coming out of either ends of the LN, particularly around the North Road junction, and also crossing over to the canal towpath. I think you've just said that there is a plan to put in place a crossing and a...
The canal towpath is handled under the Bath walking, wheeling and cycling plan. There absolutely is a plan for, and I'm sorry, I don't know the exact details of it. I don't know whether colleagues can help there on a factual point.
Yes, we've recently consulted on the Bath walking, wheeling and cycling links project, and that includes a proposal for a crossing of Beckford Road to connect this canal.
And just to follow up with the North Road junction, I think there were concerns that the turning is very tight, particularly for people.
I can answer that one. Yeah. So I should answer them where I can. I can answer that one. As part of the permanent implementation of the scheme, we're aware that there have been concerns of cyclists that they're being pushed out into the road there, so there will be the permanent, as I say, although there seems to be some scepticism, all of this stuff is temporary and is coming out and will be replaced with permanent structures. The permanent structure will have a through cycle lane on it, a through cycle access, so that it won't push cyclists into the road.
Thank you for your many comments and your statement. I have 2 or 3 questions. How do you want me to do this, Chair?
Sarah,
I'd prefer them one at a time if that's possible.
I understand one at a time, but the chair likes me to only do one at a time. So first of all, you've said that quite a lot of the people who have spoken today have basically made up costs about data. Could you give us more information about the costs?
The cost of the scheme is £306,000.
That's the allocation.
That's the allocation for the scheme, £306,000.
Have there been any FOIs on costs that have been sent out?
I don't know that. I wouldn't know that. It's not something that comes to members.
I'm very pleased to hear that you're going to deal with the cyclists, but we've been told that this meeting is about this decision, and you're basically just said to us that this decision has to happen now. And if you don't make this decision now, then you'll have to take it out.
We'll run out of time. Yeah.
You will run out of time. So it seems to most people in this room that you've already made the decision.
No, we could remove it. I've made the I have already made the decision. You're challenging that decision, but the decision. But we could remove it.
I guess, and what I'm saying is, the decision is being challenged, and it seems that whatever questions or data or information that has been made, including the 76 people who are against this, it's that you've already made the decision. And whatever happens in this room, the decision is already made.
Well,
so this call-in is just about the decision has already been made.
As a matter of fact, that is the case. I have already made the decision. You are now challenging that decision and asking, and you have three options. You can agree with the call-in and ask me to reconsider the decision. You can ask for the decision to go to full council. Or you can say that you don't agree with the call-in and that the decision stands. Those are, factually, that's what this meeting is about. Yes.
Very well put. Couldn't have done it better myself. Well done. So we move down to Hal, Fiona, and then June.
The queuing times are, in fact, quite a crucial component in your decision-making. Instinctively, I object to the word suffering here with 13 to 40 seconds. But could you give us a context about, previous studies or anything about this level?
Can I give you some context? I would simply say I agree with you that those kinds of delays, as reported in the data, are not significant. They are not significant delays. And in my judgment, they do not outweigh the benefit of the scheme. Asking people in cars to spend an absolute maximum of less than a minute extra is not, that is not a definition of suffering in my book.
Okay, thank you. Fiona.
Yeah. Going back to the question of the benefits to the more local area versus the wider area, bearing in mind I represent some of the communities in the wider area, how does the waiting for the DFT guidance about consultation stand in terms of the locals as opposed to the broader area?
It is not. It talks about making judgments, really. It doesn't talk about the specifics of what a local area is. So, because it's reasonable for it not to do that because the schemes can be huge or small. The reality is this is a tiny scheme. This is in the context of livable neighbourhoods, low traffic neighbourhoods. This is tiny. If you look at some of the ones they're putting in Bristol, where they're whole community-wide things. This is really small. So I absolutely we have gone over and above what would be expected in the guidance for consultation on a scheme like this.
Okay, thank you. June.
Thank you. I'm asking, please, can you reconsider your decision, as you have already said that you knew that this was going to be a controversial one, and that way you will at least be seen to be taking note of all residents and not just what appears to be a lot less involved in the scheme?
I'm not sure what you're asking me to do. I have already.
To reconsider your decision,
Well,
you've told us
I am. You can ask me to reconsider it if you like. That's up to you as a committee.
Yeah, I think, if I can interrupt, I think that's for the debate later
I was going to
on.
say, that's the decision you've got to make. You've got to decide whether you want to ask me to reconsider it.
Okay. That's what I'm doing.
Joanna and then Anna.
Going back to the data in this report, can you tell me where it talks about cyclists and where it talks about how many people are entering and exiting the NCN4? Because I couldn't find it.
I don't believe it does. As those things specifically, I don't believe it does talk about entry and exit to the NCN4, no.
Anna?
Thank you. It's just a question about the call-in on number 3. And I know, I was just wondering, because my background's in science, were you provided with the appendices for this data suggestion? Because I've obviously read the appendix of your data that you've been quoting. Thank you for that in due course before the meeting. But this one, I was never given these claims, have no references. Were you given them, or was it just us not given it?
Sorry, which claims are you referring
causing
to?
50% increase in traffic, the 135,000
sorry, I see.
for 1.4
Yeah.
million. Were you given the references?
I understand. No, I have no detail as to how those numbers have been. I mean, I can make some guesses at where some of them are coming from. They are all selective. They do not give context. The 50% increase in traffic is on a road that that 50% increase is something like 4 cars an hour or something. It's a very and that was the highest number that could be found in the report. So I would suggest that the figures presented are trying to present things in the worst possible light.
Make this the last one. I've got a couple. Joanna?
Sure, this is my last question. So at the beginning of this statement, you made it quite clear that you supported the LN policy, and one of the aims of the LN policy says for better health and well-being for residents from increased physical activity. You've just told me that there's no data in here about the NCN4 and cycling. Does that support increased physical activity?
Do you think that creating a street which is now better for walkers and cyclists is good for walkers and cyclists?
Not if you can't get to it safely.
Do you think that the wider walking and wheeling links scheme will improve that safety?
There have been questions around that, but we've been told that that's not part of this debate.
It's not, but what I'm saying to you is that making this decision, you can make this. The decision today is: have I made a reasonable choice?
Okay, I've got one question. Incidentally, thank you for all the questions, and thank you for the people there. I'm sorry I couldn't say that young lad. I don't know if it's a lad or a girl, was very well behaved. So if you could pass that on, I'd be very grateful. There's a lot of discussion in various places about the A36. Now, I understand that there isn't a sort of optimum situation with any A road. I mean, A roads have massive numbers of factors that decide on the number of traffic going through there. And obviously, we're thinking about a wider road. So there's been suggested that the A36 may become more congested by some crystal ball, by some people. Do you have any information to suggest that that could be the case?
No, and the announcement yesterday that it's going to be detrunked means it's much likely to become less congested. I think that's a massive win for us, and for all of us locally in the City of Bath. I think that the likelihood is that traffic will significantly reduce on the A36 once it's detrunked. So that seems very unlikely. I'm sorry, I do apologise. I'm being told it's not detrunked. I'm using the wrong terminology, but it won't be a major through route from the M4 to the south coast. I do apologise for using the wrong terminology. Thank you.
You're forgiven. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of that part of the meeting. So thank you, Mark, and everybody that took part in that. So we move on now to the closing statement by the Cabinet member. It seems a bit harsh, as you've sort of been on the spotlight.
Yeah,
for
sorry,
some
just
time.
give me a
So
second to find my closing statement. Which will be brief, I think. The Liverpool Neighbourhood Programme was introduced with a clear vision, which was to create safer, quieter and healthier residential streets by reducing through traffic, encouraging active travel like walking and cycling, and creating fairer streets for all residents, not only those who drive cars. This vision aligns directly with our broader commitments to sustainability, cleaner air and improving public health across our communities. I have to say, watching the Green Party attack schemes like this is frustrating and disturbing when incremental progressive change is what we need to do. As I've said, this scheme helps walkers and cyclists. The fact that further improvements can be made doesn't make this a bad scheme or the decision invalid. The fixation on the circulation plan, that isn't the only citywide scheme that allows for joined-up thinking. As I said, we've got the active travel plan, we've got the Bath Walking, Wheeling and Cycling Link scheme. The Sydney Place scheme supports both of these. I thank Councillor Blackburn for his sympathy. I can assure him that I have read all the documentation. The accusations of corruption, though, I think are frankly offensive, and I know them not to be true. The insinuation that there's anything other than sound decision-making based on reasonable decisions, rather than backhanders or whatever it is you're suggesting, it's just wrong. Don't make suggestions like that without any evidence. We need not to be swayed by post-truth, anti-facts, angry shouting, where what I reckon drowns out the cool, calm examination of the facts and the data. This intervention is compliant with policy, and the data shows that it has not had a significant detrimental impact on the surrounding area. That's my reason for making the decision, and that reasoning is sound. As a Liberal Democrat administration, we will be guided by policy and evidence. Yes, consultation is important, but to be clear, this isn't a referendum. Hearing people's views is absolutely vital, but that's not the same as always agreeing with all of them. We are not popularists, and we will be brave enough to make the right decision, even when that looks like it's going to be unpopular with a segment of the community. This is a sound decision. It's a decision which is legitimately open to us to make within the legislation and guidelines. It's a decision made for rational, evidence-based reasons, and I would urge the committee to dismiss the calling.
Thank you, Mark. I think we move over to Colin. So when you're ready, Colin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the one who's come to speak to you all today, but this call-in is backed across the board by councillors who are concerned. They're concerned that we don't have a clear plan. They're concerned that our residents are getting frustrated because they don't feel their best interests are being served. We need to address our goals around climate emergency and work together to improve the movement options around our authority area. But to do that, we do need buy-in, and the groundswell of backlash that has been created, discontent that councillors are ignoring as their residents, and a lack of openness about the real outcomes is bringing us all into disrepute. Can you seriously consider that a reasonable person would accept that the trial data presented is a true representation of the impact of this trial? Flying in the face of natural justice is not a good place to be. Hiding behind a party colour is not a shield from public discontent. We are meant to do things for our residents, and as Councillor Hughes said at the beginning today, we have a corporate strategy and we need to reread it. I strongly agree in a step backwards to take two forwards. It might be uncomfortable for a time, but if the gains are clear, people will buy in and embrace the change. This is a case of no consideration given to the steps backwards or appreciation how the majority ever gain their steps forward. A number of concerns have been raised about legality, Nolan principles, Wednesbury Reasonable, Equalities Act, etc. These should never be coming up in conversation because we should be doing things right first. First time, and without the need for this type of call-in action to even happen. But it has, and you now have the chance to at least put a break on this and give Councillor Elliott the opportunity to see the full trial data in a few months' time, to address all the concerns that have been raised openly, fairly and transparently. And then we can regain trust and not be seen by the reasonable person to have acted incorrectly.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Right, we now move on to the final section, which is for the panel to debate and make a recommendation of the three that I mentioned at the start of this meeting, and Councillor Elliott has recently underlined in his remarks, so we know what we have to do. Would anyone like to start the debate? Robin.
Thank you. I will be brief because I know we've had a fairly full debate on the rest. And to be honest, I'll open with an old joke about a car driver who stops to ask for directions, and the answer he gets is, well, I wouldn't start from here. And to be honest, I wouldn't start from here because this is the second time in 13 months we've visited issues around low traffic neighbourhoods and livable neighbourhoods, and it's the second time in 13 months I'm stressing the importance of a circulation plan. And I appreciate that Mark doesn't agree with that, but I do say, and I continue to say, that I believe it is an essential part of introducing low traffic neighbourhoods, of restricting traffic in a city, which is, and make it clear, I believe is a laudable policy aim. I think it's something that we should, as a council, be doing and supporting, but doing it right. And all the evidence and all the guidance, particularly from the Department of Transport, highlights the fact that behaviour change, particular behaviour change when it comes to restricting traffic movement, creates opposition. Quite often that opposition is short-term, but it creates opposition. And we know that that kind of behaviour change is difficult, so which is why it's important to get it right, to explain where it is in an overall strategy, and to make sure that you go forward on that basis. And so I appreciate that, without judging my fellow panel members' decisions, but certainly with the comments that were made by yourself, Mark, about the timescale that you're cramped into, but we kind of know where this is going. But I would emphasise that we do not want to revisit this in 2026 on another low traffic neighbourhood or another LTO and have the same arguments about the need for traffic movement in a small area should be judged in the wider area of circulation in Bath and in Bath and North East Somerset. So I'll bring my remarks to a conclusion there.
Anybody else wish to speak? Joanna?
I haven't prepared anything, and I have been rather disappointed today that the Green Party, as a party, has been particularly selected out, opposed to any other party at Bath and North East Somerset, for opposing livable neighbourhoods. As everybody in this room knows, I was the member who brought forward the livable neighbourhood policy in 2020, and I fully support it, but it's about the right measure in the right place. And over the last 4 years, I have repeatedly asked for a circulation plan because I'm aware that there are a huge number in our community that need to be taken on this journey to ensure that we do have spaces that are walkable and cyclable for everyone. And the process to date has been that a decision was made on a few areas with no coherent, joined-up thinking about how they will link together, where they sat, and who they affected. You have clearly told us about the timescale, and it seems that we're in a situation of this is it or nothing, or we lose everything. And it seems also to many that the data on the A36 has been cherry-picked. Whether that's true or not is hard for the people outside of this room to understand. And my experience as a cyclist using this route most days is that the livable neighbourhood has not improved the situation for me or for others, and that you are now forced actually up and to cross 2 lanes of highways where the lights then change, and then you are forced into lots of traffic, and it's very dangerous going up, which is not the natural desire line, or going down to deal with more traffic. I'm very grateful that there will be a better walking and cycling plan, but it's a bit like the circulation plan. It's not there yet. And therefore, I would request, again, like Councillor Moss, that you pause this decision and you make sure that we do have data that everybody is comfortable with and feels that is fair and well run, so that this decision takes everybody on that journey, and there isn't this disparity between those for and those against. Thank you.
Actually, I thought we did have a cycling and walking plan, do we not? Yeah.
Thank you. It would appear that I jumped the gun a bit earlier on, so I'm now bringing it back up again. I feel very uncomfortable about this decision, about this scheme, because as so many people, it would appear, so many residents feel they have not been engaged with, which is almost like number 1 point, I would have thought. And so, once again, I'm asking, please, can this be reconsidered? Can you reconsider your decision? And after all the info has been brought together from the surveys, that we revisit it.
So, just to be clear, are you moving to make a decision? Because I think...
Oh, yes, I suppose I am.
I think you're probably, dare I say it, a little bit early.
Am I still jumping the gun? Okay.
I think we'd like to hear from all councillors before we come to that
Fine.
point.
Thank
That's
you.
all right. So, Jeff?
If we take a road with thousands of cars going down it every day, and we make a decision that they're not going to go down there, we're going to end up with these kind of stats every time we try and do that. And what it comes down to is how much are they going to be affected. And if the effect is between 13 seconds and 40 seconds, it seems to me none of us, I think, can make the case that that's going to be that significant. So for me, this, leaving aside all the engagement, if I just focus on the numbers, they're exactly as I would expect them to be, other than I never thought that the time delay would be so low.
Yeah, thank you, Hal. I'd like to make a couple of comments, if you don't mind, at this stage. I was very impressed with the passion of all the speakers, the 12 speakers that we had at the start of the meeting. And I mean, as we all know, it's obviously quite a controversial activity. But the one that stood out in my mind was Alistair Gavin Douglas's comment about Bath being a trend and that roads are being closed as we go forward. Now, I've lived in this area a long time, and I have seen the way Bath has denuded itself of traffic in its most precious areas. And always, when you push back with motorists, they find it annoying, which is perfectly understandable. But I think you've got to look at the centre of Bath now compared to what it was like 20 years ago. And I mean, it's far, far better now. It's lovely. And I mean, you talk about, we haven't talked too much about sort of the commercial aspects of it, but you're not going to tell me that more tourists don't come to Bath now because there are many more pedestrianised roads which give the opportunity for much healthier lifestyles and more pleasant environment. So I just think this is one along the route. And I applaud what's going on here, because it's definitely, in my view, an improvement for the city-wide. Yes, I accept, and Hal made the point very well, there are congestion issues, but we are trying to re-educate people to move away from the motor car. So I think that is our policy, so I think that's fine. I think that's what we should be doing. So I actually support dismissing it. Jess, do you want to speak?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to respond to some of the points. I think I certainly, as a Bath councillor, really regret how divisive these schemes become. And if the citywide circulation plan can help in future with other schemes, that's a really good thing, because it can give everybody a framework to pin specific interventions to. But we're not able to judge that today. We have to look specifically at this decision. And looking in detail at the call-in, I feel that some of this is a little bit motherhood and apple pie, where it talks about projects and schemes that are going to work for everybody. Inevitably, if we're asking people to change their behaviour and if we're making changes to the way people travel, there's going to be opposition. And I feel that the council has gone above and beyond to bring out all those different voices and to expose the impacts and give everyone a chance to have a say. I thank Joanna for noting that she did have a role really as an architect in the Liverpool Neighbourhood Programme. And a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, we heard from Councillor Lokes from Waltham Forest about the reality of trying to make changes to people's neighbourhoods and the kind of opposition that it generates. So we're all familiar with the territory that we're in. And I really started this process with an open mind. I've spoken to different people, and I know that the scheme as it is now is not perfect. It's not perfect for cyclists. But the reality is it does create a space where there are no through traffic. And I've visited it several times, both as a pedestrian, a cyclist, and as a driver. And I feel that it is in line with the livable neighbourhoods policy that we have, and I feel that a reasonable decision has been made based on the evidence. So on that point, I would really also like to move this to a vote that we dismiss this. I do not see the benefit in taking this decision to full council, and I do not see the benefit in this being reconsidered, given the case that Mark has set out.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder for this motion? Anna, do you wish to speak?
I think I've spoken enough.
Those against? And abstentions?
Chair, I'm a bit confused about the process, because we can dismiss, we can refer, or we can defer to council itself. So which one are we, is this?
It's been moved that we dismiss.
And that's it.
So is everybody clear? So we had, I think we had 6 in favour, and then so those against? Okay, that appears to be...
So if I dismiss it, can we then have a discussion about it being, that's the end?
So there's 2. We've definitely got 2. Are you going to vote against, Joe? Or abstain?
Abstaining.
Okay. Thank you.
That means that it will take effect.
Yeah, so that means the decision is to be taken with immediate effect. And I think that's the end of the meeting. So thank you very much.